Okay, thank you everybody for attending this symposium. It's been amazing to hear from all of these collected speakers doing all of this amazing work all over the world. This next hour, we will be featuring 4 more speakers. So first up, we have Grace Cramer, who's an advisor to the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, the Manufacturing Africa program in particular. We have Spring Gombe, the project manager from the United Nations Tech Access Partnership. Kamel Abdul Rahim, team lead at the WHO-led Health Cluster Iraq COVID Supply Chain. And we have John Wilczynski, Executive Director of America Makes. So I'm going to suggest that everyone put all of your questions for every speaker into the Q&A section. And then at the end of everyone's presentation, we'll go through all of the Q&A. Please put who you're addressing in the question. And then at the very end of the session, in about 50 minutes, we will go through them all as we can. So let's start with Grace Cramer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to try and turn on my video. Apologies if there's some problems with it. I had some issues earlier in the day. So you might not be able to see me, but let's hope this works. Okay, it's working. Fantastic. So nice to meet you all. I'm from the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. It used to be known as DFID, so that's how some of you might know it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing around PPE. And particularly the work that we're doing around supply chain and demand mapping. So as soon as the COVID crisis hit, our team, which works on manufacturing, so first my day job, my normal job is I am the Manufacturing Africa Advisor in Nigeria, which is a program that works on attracting more foreign direct investment into Nigeria. When COVID-19 hit, we all moved off our regular jobs and focused on how we could best help the manufacturing sector adjust to and respond to COVID-19. So some of this work has involved a partnership with IFC, providing technical advisory support to different firms who are transitioning to PPE or who want to expand and scale up their PPE production. Some of our work has been looking at vaccine production in Sub-Saharan Africa, given that a lot of resource will be dedicated to the COVID vaccine. It's helping these countries continue the vaccinations work that they need to do. A lot of the work has been focused on the country level, so helping PPE manufacturers in countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, Egypt. But the piece of work that I'm going to talk to you about today, and I don't know if I can share my share a slide. Is that okay, Devin?
Yes, that is brilliant. You should have the ability to do so. Is it allowing you?
Okay, I'm just going to check. Great. So yeah, okay, so in that case, let me share this slide. So the work I'm going to talk about today is our work mapping the global, here we go. Okay, unfortunately it doesn't let me. Sorry, our laptops don't always agree with Zoom, unfortunately, at the Foreign Office. Okay, so I'm going to talk without a slide. So briefly, I'm going to talk through what this PPE supply and demand mapping looks like. So it's being done with it's being done by our implementing partner, and the focus is on 4 key areas. The first is mapping out current and predicted global demand for different PPE products. And by PPE, I just want to mention earlier, this is in the slide, but I'll have to read it out. This cuts across quite a few different products. So apron, medical masks, different types of medical masks, gowns, coverall, eye protectors, body gloves, body bags, cleaning equipment, waste bags, shoe covers, and some very high quality non-medical masks. In terms of geography, we're looking at the entire, we're looking globally, so we're looking at the whole world. But to make this manageable, we're looking at broad regions and then 10 countries in particular. Those haven't been chosen because this work hasn't started yet, which is why I'm talking at such a high level. So we're going to start by mapping out current and predicted future global demand. So trying to figure out what demand looks like now, what demand will look like in the short term, maybe after a year, and then what demand will look like after 5 years. We had feedback from manufacturers that part of the reason they were reluctant to shift into PPE or to expand production was they'd seen massive changes in supply and demand in a short space of time, really big changes in price, and so that was putting them off. So we wanted to give them some of the best information that we could get on what we thought demand would look like over the short, medium, and long term. We also wanted to give them a deeper view on who was demanding these products, because a lot of them also said we don't know who the buyers are. They had often, textile firms shifting into PPE had often only worked with commercial buyers before. They hadn't worked with governments or multilateral procurement systems before. This document will also identify who the big buyers are, what products they're purchasing, what standards they demand, and what type of price they're looking at as well. We're helping them identify not just which governments are buying, but which particular agencies are responsible. Is it centralized? Is it decentralized? And then how they buy it. Are they bidding? Is there a procurement process to try and help firms manage this? So that's what we're doing on the demand side. On the supply side, we're mapping out the different supply chains that exist across PPE. So not just the firms producing certain goods, but also their input suppliers as well, to the degree that we can. So we can identify things where input shortages have been, so melt-blown fabric, for example. And then in that as well, we'll be identifying those key producers as well, those big producers, where they're based, and what standards they're producing to as well. So the manufacturers also have a better view of who else is in their market space, who's doing what. Can they maybe play the role of an input supplier, for example? And the final piece of this is that we'll be trying to disseminate this work as widely as possible. We want as many manufacturers to see this as possible. We want lots of different organizations to have this data as well, so they can make the most informed decisions on programming around PPE. That's how the program will run. It should, by December 2020, oh, my video turned off. The work should be complete by December 2020. I will work with Devon to try and understand how we can best share this with all of you on the call today.
That is excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your work. Next up, we have Spring Gombe joining us from the United Nations Tech Access Partnership.
Hi, I hope you can all hear me okay.
Yep.
Right. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. I have slides and I'm hoping I can share them. And if not, I will try and speak slowly through what we at the Tech Access Partnership are doing. Give me a second. Doesn't seem to be allowing me to share my screen, but give me a second. So, showing me the relevant screen. I can't see the relevant screen. Right. Well, let me just start walking you through it, and I will show you the screen once I can figure out why I can't see it. Files. Not showing anything. Okay. So the Technology Access Partnership is a partnership between the UN Technology Bank for the Least Developed Countries, which I will describe because it's a relatively new UN entity, the United Nations Development Project, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, and the World Health Organization. And the partnership was established essentially to try and bring together the collective intelligence and the collective capacities of these 4 agencies to enable equitable access to technologies in 3 areas for initially the least developed countries, but this was extended then to other developing countries. So we work for, if you like, all developing countries, and we work in a process of working groups in which we engage experts to provide advice to us in giving support to all developing countries. The idea is to match make between technology seekers and technology holders in 3 focal areas. So in PPE, and there's some interesting overlap between the work that we are doing and the work that Grace has just described that the FCDO is doing. So we're working in PPE, we're working also in respiratory devices, and we're working in diagnostics. And what we're trying to do is to enable commercial or nonprofit actors in developing countries who have an interest in technologies in one of these 3 areas, access technology holders who have an interest in one of these, who hold the technology in one of these 3 areas and are willing to share it on an open source basis with the technology seekers. So the technology holders can come from anywhere in the world. They do not necessarily need to be a commercial entity, though they often are commercial entities that deposit their technologies on a platform that we have created for that end. And the technology seekers deposit a matching request on this platform. And through a process of vetting and guidance on the policy, legal, and technical landscape around each of these technologies, we support the tech transfer transaction between the 2 actors. Let me just add here that we do not play a role in helping either the technology holder or the technology seeker understand the market dynamics in a particular country in the same way that Grace has described that the FCDO is seeking to do. As UN agencies, obviously, we have to remain quite neutral, and we cannot be seen to be giving an advantage to one or another commercial actor in a given space. So the homework of assessing whether there is a market case or a business case to be made for a technology seeker or holder is really their business. But we do try and provide as in-depth an understanding of the legal policy and technical and especially regulatory infrastructure around the 3 technology areas in order to help those actors have as smooth a process as possible in understanding what barriers there might be to either creating new manufacturing capacity or repurposing existing manufacturing capacity in order to produce a given technology. We have what I like to think of as a machine room that's divided into 3 working groups. We have a working group that does the vetting of technologies that's guided very much by the expertise, technical expertise resident in WHO. And then legal experts including Medicines Patent Pool and others are involved in in creating legal checklists that deal with all issues from transparency to liability and warranty to support the working groups, to support the technology seekers and holders in the transaction process. And then our final working group looks at the manufacturing resources that might be made available for manufacturing. So we hook up with development finance institutes to try and provide credit guarantees to technology seekers so that they might, either through local banks or through multilateral credit finance institutes, access the monies that they need to ramp up manufacturing. And at the same time, our 4th working group looks at extending partnerships to other actors, for example, civil society and non-state actors who are involved in implementation and logistics and distribution of technologies that might be produced so that we can monitor and evaluate if in fact we are achieving effective technology transfer and sustainable and sustained technology transfer. And then we're also always open to working with other partners from within the UN family who might have expertise in a particular area. So for example, UNIDO or UNAIDS, who have great relationships with community health workers. We were launched in May of this year. We have accompanied to date just one finalized technology transfer in the area of personal protective equipment. It is a mask that is suitable for use in a medical setting. It was the technology that was originally transferred was for an N95 respirator, but the technology seeker chose to modify some of this technical specifications so that it's now a mask that is suitable for use in hospital settings, but cannot be called an N95 respirator. And we are accompanying a number of other transactions in the area of PPE, also in diagnostics. We're looking at accompanying rapid diagnostic testing capacity development in a number of countries. And of course, in the area of respiratory devices, we're looking at ventilators. We're also beginning to look at oxygen supply and pulse oximeters, kind of thing. It's been an interesting journey. We've learned a lot as we've gone along. One of the first among these is that technology transfer is not an easy process, and it varies radically from country to country. We've supported countries in trying to assess through roadmaps that were developed by Engineers Without Borders and then refined for the purposes of our initiative. And also now we're in the process of creating a diagnostics handbook to help those who are interested in entering diagnostics manufacture understand the regulatory process. We've had a lot of feedback from technology seekers and actually technology holders that the regulatory barriers vary from country to country, and what is required and the expense involved can put them off. And so we're trying to really help actors understand what they're getting into before they get into it. The intention is to try and support the conclusion of 4 transactions in this year and 6 transactions in each of the 2 coming years, and to build on that as we go along. And as Grace has mentioned, the dynamics around the pandemic mean that we have to reevaluate constantly where we are and whether or not we're looking at the right technologies. And so we try very hard to make sure that we're doing that. I'll leave it there. I suppose there'll be questions, and I hope I'll be able to show you at least one slide that walks you through the process later on in the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was great. We've been operating from the ground up, so it's really interesting to see what, you know, the top down, attempting to remain neutral and attempting to help as best one can process looks like. So next up, we have Kamel Abdul Rahim, who's a team lead at the WHO-led health cluster in the Iraq COVID supply chain. Thank you for joining us. And please remember, go ahead and type questions into the Q&A, and we'll ask them to our panelists at the end of the hour.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you for the invitation for this symposium. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Kamel Abdul Rahim. I've been working with WHO for the last 20 years, and my expertise is in medical equipment management, procurement, and supply chain management. I need to first apologize for my voice. I've been on travel and it seems I got cold, but hopefully I will be able to present my presentation. I have a small presentation. I'll try to, this was the screen. Do you see my presentation?
We do, yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so I'll be talking about needs assessment in relation to the COVID-19 supplies for Iraq. The outline of the presentation will be mainly on the what is meant by need assessment, the methodology that we are using, and the challenges with that. With the start of the COVID-19, there was for sure a great request from the Ministry of Health to support them with the supplies needed. So the first question came how to address or to assess the needs. So as you know, the needs assessment is a kind of dynamic process which is used for defining and addressing gaps. So we had at one point of time to examine what is available and what is the desired or what is required to be available. And in between, we calculate the gap. So it is a kind of strategic activity and part of the planning process or the procurement planning process to ensure that we address the deficiency or the needs of particular items, whether in a hospital or in a region or in a country as a whole. So our aim was mainly to focus on the COVID-19 supplies, diagnostic kits, PPE, and any kind of medical equipment that used in the case management. So at the beginning, we were actually, whenever request or whenever was a demand, we were consulting with the required staff at the Ministry of Health or within the Directorate of Health in particular regions to see what is available for that particular item, and then to compare what they need, and then to address or to come out with a list with the needs. Differently, we also were trying to find out if there's a local or global standards that we can refer to ensure that whatever request is coming is in harmony with those kind of standards. So this is a very general, let's say, methodology to address the needs. The end result is to have a kind of prioritized list of needs, but definitely in the process, we look at if we have any kind of local standards available to address. Then we look into the catchment area, if there is a request, for instance, for ventilators, then we look into the where this ventilator will be installed, the infrastructure, the human resources, all those things will be also calculated. And then we come out with the list, and then we put the budgeting for that list, and then we come out with a final request. So when it comes to COVID-19, the first thing we had WHO has produced kind of guidance list for the COVID-19 health communities. So whatever request we received, we were comparing that list to those kind of standards to see if the item matches. But here there's no quantities, it's only the items and the specifications. So we were trying then to make sure, first of all, that we have the items that are needed in that particular response. And then we go back to the requester to ensure with him that if in case there is request for ventilators or monitors, that we ensure what is exactly needed, for what purpose, where to be installed, do you have the human resources necessary to ensure that those equipment are fully functioning and well utilized. So those are the main guidelines that we were using at that time, just to cross-match and ensure that we come out with a very defined list of needs that can be then prioritized and budgeted so that it can be it will pass through for procurement and to purchase the equipment. Another technique we used, or another method we used, we have what we called generic needs assessment calculator. This was done at our headquarter level, where you have, it says here, only fill yellow cells. So some medical officers, they will fill in how many beds they're going to support. Is it severe or ICU? So you put here your calculations, and then it's a huge list. It includes equipment, supplies, kits. So whenever you put any number, so at the end it calculates, for instance, if this is for ICU, we say that 25% of patients will need ICU. Then you'll come out with a list, how many beds you will need, how many monitors, how many pulse oximeters, and the different kind of supplies. But this is really, it's very, very tense, and it requires many inputs. And as I said, the need assessment is a dynamic process. So things changes by time. So the time we receive the request, we process the request, could be some other donors or partners, they provide that support to the Ministry of Health. So in this case, maybe their needs will change over the time. So we were also going back and forth with them to see if they received, meanwhile, any support from other partner. So at least we can take out that part or to increase in different items. And then at the end, we will have what we call the procurement list. So this will ensure that we have exactly the number of items required. For instance, patient monitors. Then you say, okay, we have required 15, and the cost, this is estimate cost, and the cost, and then the specification itself, if there are any requirements need to be taken into consideration in terms of accessories or consumables for that particular equipment, it's also been addressed. So this was part of the scenario we're using. And then there was another list that was done by the health cluster, where they approached different Directorate of Health in Iraq, and they obtained directly from them their needs. But definitely in some cases, you will see that the needs is over-exaggerated in some cases. So this also, if you make the costing, it will go to almost $100 million. So definitely there was also, it came out to be like a shopping list. And this was the dilemma or the, let's say, the obstacle or challenges we were facing, that when you open the door that you receive requests, so people would exaggerate their needs just to make sure that if I ask for 10 and I get 4, so 4 is actually my plan, but they always exaggerate the quantities needed. And what we did actually is the next step, that we went for very specific support. In some cases, over the time, it was clear that in some particular areas, there's a need to expand services. So we felt, let's make the support or make the intervention focus to particular scope. Could be, for instance, for expansion of services for the ICU, then there will be only ICU equipment, or only for PPE. So we brought in a large quantities of PPEs. Then there was also the need of lab kits, PCR testing kits, and the related kits. So there was focusing on only bringing those kind of kits. So we tried to make sure that we focus on particular scope that we address the COVID-19. And as you see, we came out with different lists. This is, for instance, for the ICU, we made calculation that how many patients we will have as critical cases. It will need admission. So how many beds we're going to bring in, how many ventilators, how many suction pumps, infusion pumps. So we made all those calculations, and we tried to support in particular small areas. And this is kind of request that we receive from Ministry of Health, where it's very specific to lab items, where you have, let's say, the number of tests required. Let's say at one point they were asking for 40,000. Then we agreed with them that we'll bring in almost 100,000 tests for them for between 3 months duration. So it was very focused and support. And we also had the expansion for the ICU services. We had the plan there, the costing itself, and then we managed to go and procure the different type of items required, from patient beds, patient monitors, ICU ventilators. The Ministry of Health, they had their plan to purchase almost 300 ventilators. So we said, okay, this will be done through you. We will not interfere into that. We went to focus into other items like infusion pumps, range pump, defibrillators, all those kind of. So there was very specific list that we're going to support. When it comes to challenges, it was always not easy to have, to receive baseline information. So when request comes in and we ask what is available in that region or in that hospital, so it was always not reliable or information that we received. And they're always saying that whatever we receive, there's always a demand, and whatever available, it's maybe obsolete equipment, or it requires repair, or some items require consumables. So there was always not available basic information that we build on. That's why we felt it's more efficient that we focus on particular intervention like PPE or kits or supporting expansion of particular services. So at least we know that those will be installed or sent to a place where it doesn't have those kind of equipment. And then definitely there's an issue with resources. We as WHO or even the partner, we don't have that extra, fund available to support the country. That's why with our limited resources, we tried our best to ensure that we make the best use of those resources, and we focus our support to things that the ministry or the country cannot bring, that we will bring to those countries. And one example, for instance, was the oxygen concentrators. At one point there was a demand, and we were able to bring in almost 400 oxygen concentrators into the country, and it made a big change because the ventilator that Ministry of Health has requested would take almost 6 months to arrive, and in between there was a lag. And that's why when the request came for oxygen concentrators, we definitely we were happy to support, and this was made through what we call the UN is COVID-19 portal, supply chain portal, which was created between different UN agencies, in particular WHO, and it was under the umbrella of the UN, and whatever countries, NGOs, partners, they can go register into that portal and they can request supplies. It includes PPEs, equipment, ventilators, patient monitors, and also kits. So it was kind of a way that we ensure quick response, and definitely there is a process to be go through, but it's a quick process, and you ensure that you get the thing that you need on time. And definitely there is always, in particular in Iraq, as you know, Iraq, there's a federal ministry, and we have one ministry in the Kurdish part, and there was always political interest or political changes that whenever we bring in equipment for Iraq, then we have to identify how many will go for the federal ministry and how many of that quantity will go for the northern part or the Kurdistan part. And always there is a challenges even with that particular area. Sometimes there's political interest that some will support particular cities rather than the whole country, depends on their origins. So there's always, a challenge here that we try to make sure that what support is coming, it address where it really is in need. Those are a few photos of things that we distributed, which include the oxygen concentrators and the excuse me, and the PPE, and those were distributed particularly to the whole country of Iraq, and they went into the Directorate of Health in Iraq. That's all from my side.
Well, thank you so much. That was a great overview, and I really appreciate the detail of the slides and the look into your tools. Reminder, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of Zoom, and we will address them after this next presentation. Next up, we have John Wilczynski, who's the Executive Director of America Makes here in the US. Thank you for joining us, John.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me well. I'll pull my slides up right now.
Yep.
I can figure out how to do that. Oh my goodness. Some days are just harder than others, but there we are. Hopefully you can see that. Go into presentation mode.
Yep, we got it.
Perfect. So I'll give just a quick overview, and then we can get to Q&As. I think I'm the last person, but I'm going to talk to you about a program that we're working on in the States called the Advanced Manufacturing Crisis Production Response. And what that is really focused on how can the manufacturing community support in time of crisis. So immediately, how is it supporting while COVID is still upon us and ramping up in a lot of areas? And also, what does this look like in the long run, recognizing that we don't know what the next crisis will be. However, there will be more crises. So just really quick run through, this is some early information on how we got started in this. Just for some background, America Makes is an institute, a public-private partnership that is focused on advancing the adoption of additive manufacturing. So quite simply, we are in place to convene, coordinate, and catalyze the industry, really focused on advancing technology, advancing the workforce, and developing an ecosystem. With that, we've got a number of relationships with lots of organizations across the US and across the globe. And when the shutdown hit the US, we were asked by many of our partners how to get involved and how to support the efforts. And that caused us to really ramp up our engagement and pull together, first focusing on communication, trying to understand what the problem was. All of that led down the path. And this story's been told, a few times at this point. So I won't spend much energy going through this, but really what we found was many, just like all of you on the phone, many folks wanted to support any way they could, and most were willing to do anything necessary in order to help support the crises. The key there was we felt that there was a critical role needed for really coordinating the response. So bringing the folks together, but then trying to identify what to work on. And it's not necessarily much different than what a couple of the past speakers have just walked through. We through our efforts focused on trying to understand the need and then connect to the manufacturing community that could support it. And specifically, we focused on, getting designs reviewed to the point that we would have some understanding and awareness, or not awareness, but rather acceptance of those designs. Really, we were looking to make sure we were delivering safe product. We collectively, the additive or 3D printing community, we're delivering safe and effective devices to those that were in need. So it forced a number of different activities over the first 4 or 5 months of the pandemic in the US, connection to many folks and distribution of many thousands of products. But when we look at the crisis and look forward a little bit and start to think about how do we build an enduring infrastructure? What do we need to put in place so that when crises hit, whatever they might be, we are in a better position to respond? So the way we're looking at this, and I'll just spend the last couple of minutes talking through our approach and mentioned an activity that's happening here, is to, if we think of building an enduring infrastructure, we want to understand the regulatory considerations. We need to understand the workforce that is going to actually produce these components, whatever that might look like, from manufacturers to the maker community. We need to understand what capabilities those folks need to have and how they align to regulatory requirements for the product, whatever role they may serve in the long run. So as we try to get this capability established, we've spent energy early on, like everyone on the phone, focusing on the rapid response, and the community at large has come together and really delivered in this space. We saw all, different types of organizations coming together to meet this need. Then we saw quite a bit of convening of the ecosystem, whether it's OSMS, ourselves, or many others, bringing people together. We saw the power of the community come to work. So where we're at right now is really focusing on and moving across this continuum to the right. So how do we scale a capability? So, using tools, more specifically focusing on digitally distributed manufacturing, so that we can get the information to the places that need it in a format that they can use it, when they need it so they can ultimately deliver. So additive and many other technologies have proven the model of distributed manufacturing here very recently, which is in one way a very important thing for all of us who are working in this space. But what we also have identified is a series of different lessons learned, things that we know we need to do better. And really we're looking toward preparedness. How do we, as a country and as a globe, better prepare the community for times of crisis? And then as we build a capability, how do we exercise it regularly? So one of the things that we've talked about, just to try to help people understand this, part of our efforts to scale a capability and then ultimately exercise it and know that that works is establishing trust and having trust in the system. So when we go to dial 911 here, we understand what that means. That only came through a series of activity and quite a bit of energy over the years. We need to exercise the capability and ultimately do drills to prove that that capability worked. So in an attempt to take this on, this is a extremely busy document, but I'll just very simply walk through the high level program that we're working on and really focus just on a couple of items here. The bottom 3 gray boxes on the right-hand side of the screen. So we are at America Makes leading an activity that we call AMCPR, which is again focused on putting together a crisis production response. So in order to do that, we are building a roadmap and a playbook right now. So we're in the midst of that. We're currently in the circle that has got those 3 different colors in it, the gray, yellow, and red. We're just kicking off some workshops, or we've actually had some of the workshops. We're having more workshops starting next week again. But all of this in an attempt to build a roadmap. What does this capability really need to look like? Where are we at today? And what do we need to put in place so that the community at large can respond? The next step beyond that is establishing a playbook. So it's, I think of it as the break in case of emergency kind of playbook that you can pull out and go off and exercise. One of the key deliverables out of this program is building this model repository and portal. So you can think of that as it's really our digital thread. It is the tool that will help us deliver information where it needs to be delivered in a format that is consumable, whomever may need to consume that. So this will be an initial concept delivery and an MVP of what this system looks like. But the asset will then be something that hopefully can be scaled and ultimately used, much more broadly. A key component of that, and which is, kind of the main takeaway of this talk from me, is we're going to be testing. You'll see a bit of a loop in that line item there, the model repository and portal, which is MRP design testing. So that in that loop, we're doing a series of we're testing a series of scenarios. So we've identified 5 different dimensions of risk and complexity, and we're going to vary those from low to high across those different dimensions and then test the system. So what I mean by that is, we're considering healthcare crises, we're considering natural disasters, we're considering infrastructure breakdowns, we're considering national security. Again, these are just pilot demonstrations, but in an attempt to actually prove out that this system works. And then there's a final component that is focused on the education and workforce, which we really saw as a critical need as organizations were trying to pivot their businesses to help support in times of crisis. They didn't necessarily have the team in place or the workers in place to actually take advantage of this. So that's kind of a really quick summary. I know we're probably way over time at this point, so I will stop sharing and welcome any questions anyone might have.
Thank you so much, John. It looks like Spring may have one of her slides available, so we're going to cut back to Spring real quick, and then we will open up for Q&A, and I'll be directing some of that. Spring, do you want to go ahead and show your screen?
Oh gosh, I hope you will see this.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, great. It worked. So actually this is, America Makes has covered much of what we're doing here in almost a much more sophisticated way. So I wonder if I should be talking about this at all, but I won't let myself be intimidated. So here, this is what we're trying to do with the Tech Access Partnership. So what we think happens is that it's a demand-driven process in which we receive a technology request, right? And then we start to develop a country profile of this of the context in which this technology seeker will be working. So that's, is this technology suitable for the local context? What are the regulatory technical challenges? What is the carrying capacity? What opportunities might exist? And at the same time, we're trying to find local partners. And here local, because we're talking about developing countries, it can mean the country itself, but it can also mean the region. So for example, in the area of diagnostics, or even in ventilators and other devices, there are only a small number of countries, if we take the African continent, for example, that have the capacity to do either the manufacture of these technologies, or importantly, the regulatory approval. And since we're dealing with life and death technologies, that's not something that we want to take lightly, right? So we also, when we work with particular technology seekers, we explore the potential for them to produce for a region or a sub-region. As I said, we mentioned, we then identify the tech holder and we try to see how effective tech transfer would be. So it's not just about you have a suitable technology or even optimal technology, it's how prepared are you to support the tech seeker through the tech transfer process, with sharing the specifications, but also doing all kinds of on-the-ground support to them. And the various partners, depending on their expertise, support this process. And then while the facilities are being set up, while the tech seeker is doing the first tests of whatever product it is that they have developed, we are talking to the regulators. We're trying to figure out how to help them understand what they will go through. We're helping them look at financing support, as I mentioned. And here the UN Capital Development Fund is going to play a major role because they provide a credit guarantee, and that enables local banks to take a risk on what are normally medium-sized enterprises. So we've had almost no demand from large-scale producers. As you'd imagine, they have their own resources, they can do this. And the very small ones probably don't even know we exist and that this mechanism is available to them. We do have interest from medium-sized enterprises. At the moment, we're struggling with a bit of a mismatch between what the development finance institutes consider small amounts of money and the medium-sized enterprises consider they can absorb. So the maximum amount we've seen that medium-sized enterprises have said they're able to absorb is something in the region of $5 million to scale up production. The minimum investment that the African Development Bank, for example, is willing to make is in the region of $15 million. So there's a $10 million gap between absorption capacity and making resources available, even though there's a desperate need for technologies. And then finally, as I said earlier, we try to support the implementation process and the logistical rollout and the deployment of the technology in question. In our best case scenario, that will take maybe 3 or 4 months. With diagnostics, it's going to take much, much, much longer than that. Years, we're thinking, even in the short term for diagnostics is really years. And that's a challenge that we have with regard to the crisis, because 2 things happen. One, countries that are at a higher level of development and are able to produce rapid diagnostic tests, then do so. These are offered to the least developed countries on a donation basis, which is great, but which disrupts any kind of commercial interest that a commercial producer of any size might have. And it also handicaps, I guess, the political and the policy level interest in building up a resilient infrastructure, which means that in addition to providing technical support, our project is learning that we also have to start to do some kind of policy advocacy, which was not originally envisioned. I'll leave it there because I've already taken too much time.
We actually have been discovering across the board that policy is actually one of the focuses that we need to have to make for more resilient responses. We actually have a question in Q&A for you, since we have you on the line. Are there possibilities for educational programs for end users? For example, 3D printing manufacturing of PPE and other technology, like virtually. Is it helpful? Are you looking for people to create educational content that can be passed on to those in need? Or is this mostly just about, you know, connecting one company to another company or one group to another group?
I mean, in other areas of the tech bank's work, the mandate of the technology bank is to support strengthening the science, technology, and innovation base of all LDCs. So yes, there are other projects within the technology bank, but not the Tech Access Partnership, that do education and do support that. This particular project is looking at tech transfer, what we like to think of as effective tech transfer, and to that end, we expect there to be an exchange of know-how. So yes, education in the sense, how do you deploy this technology? How do you keep all of the infrastructure and management and maintenance of this technology? That kind of education we expect as part of the tech transfer process, but that comes from the technology holder. So it's not so much a freestanding education program in that regard.
Right, so it's one manufacturer that has everything, all of the knowledge on the vertical side of the process.
Correct.
Talking to another that has questions and wants feedback and all of that.
Yeah, let me just add that our experts who sit in our working groups are able often to provide additional pieces of advice. So that supplements what the technology holder might be doing. But classical education process, no.
Got it. Thank you so much. Next up, we have a question for Grace. The FCDO is the UK government's equivalent of the US Department of State. And you mentioned the IFC, the International Finance Corporation in your talk. Do you cooperate with other foreign aid donors and development banks like the World Bank on needs and demand data and the kind of work that you presented?
Sure, of course. So just to clarify, yes, we are the US State Department, but FCDO is the US State Department and USAID mixed together. We used to be DFID, and now we're the FCDO. We're combined with our foreign office. So that's where the confusion may come from. Yes, we do plan to work across the board with anyone working in the space. And if you have any information or data that could help with this mapping, then we'd be so happy to hear it and for you to share it with us. We are speaking with WHO, World Bank, CHI, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID as well, a couple others that I've forgotten off the top of my head, Tony Blair Institute. And yes, we reached out to the broadest range of stakeholders that we know working in this space, but you may know more. So please let us know if you know anyone doing anything similar to this.
Thank you so much. Next question we have for Kamel for the Iraq Health Cluster. So the question is, what scope do you see for innovation in the systems that you presented? For example, from going from spreadsheets to platforms. Is this something that the WHO is already working on? Or are you already working in different types of innovation?
Yeah, this is a very valid question. True. I mean, at one point we felt that it's important that we move from the spreadsheet to a platform. We are now working on a platform for our agency, for our needs, but also it could incorporate also whatever, let's say, the planning process into that. And then but definitely we're open if there's an innovations available. Yeah, we're open for that. But for time being, yeah, we're working on our own to be developed, and it's maybe at the last stage actually, and it should be up and running by next month. There was also a question before that, if who's in charge of thinking whether the government agencies actually got what they need. Well, actually, it's a tricky question because there's no such person or entity in charge. I can say within the UN community, we try to share information. We try to make sure that we complete each other rather to compete. And sometimes when we know that, let's say, UNDP or UNHCR, they're providing particular items, we talk to each other to say, okay, I will bring this also. It will go to X and Y and Z. So maybe you make sure that things that you bring will go to other places. So we try to make sure that we fill the gaps in different locations within Iraq. But definitely this is in coordination with the Ministry of Health. We do everything in coordination with the authorities.
And one last question is, do you still see significant demand for BiPAP, O2 concentrators, what's the other one? Or ventilators?
Yeah, for ventilators, to my knowledge, there's a huge shipment coming in. They almost requested for almost 300 ventilators. So I don't think there's a demand for ventilators. For BiPAPs, yes, I believe there's a request. There's been, and it's still in need. Oxygen concentrators, I'm not sure because we brought in lately almost 400 and I did not receive any request, but for the BiPAPs, yes, there's a need.
Thank you so much. And we have a number of questions for John. So let's see. Let's start with.
We only have a few minutes because I got to go jump on an interview in a couple minutes, so I do got to jump. So rapid fire.
Absolutely. So how do you think manufacturers weigh out the cost benefits of being agile to changing needs and situations? Like, how do you think they activate based on any specific one event?
That's a tough and that's a really complicated question. I was hoping you wouldn't take that one first. Yeah, it depends. I mean, it's varied, and we do a lot with really small organizations as well as really large organizations. And you know, when the crisis first hit, we saw many just act like all of us did. But then pretty shortly thereafter, we started to see, you know, the folks that were keeping track of dollars and cents, and honestly, some of our partners who reacted very quickly are in businesses that are suffering pretty dramatically because of lockdowns. So their ability to use their resources when they want to, they're not in a position that they can do it. So we've seen a lot of shifts towards, you know, really investigating business cases and understanding where does it make sense versus what we saw in the earliest months where people were figuring it out and, you know, willing to take risks and get paid someday, hopefully maybe later. It's shifted a lot harder as far as what we've seen too. You know, there's got to be some business case behind it because they're having trouble supporting themselves outside of it. So that was an ambiguous answer, I know, but it's tough.
Well, just to dovetail on that, you listed a goal of establishing a real-time supply chain data exchange, which I imagine would go towards building resiliency and getting people paid. Is that part of the roadmap you shared, or is that a different agency, different group?
So we imagine it will be collected as part of, you know, it will be a dot on the roadmap. It's certainly nothing that's getting accomplished under the work that we're doing. We see it as a flag down the road that needs to be addressed to truly, you know, make this work, which has a lot, and we've talked about this a number of times. I mean, it has a lot of long-term resiliency opportunities if we're able to do this well. You know, hopefully we get out of crises and we're just worried about strong, resilient, and agile businesses that can respond to crises or to opportunities rather.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I want to be respectful of your time, but you did mention there are some workshops. We'd be happy to share details with attendees if you want to send us.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Sabrina's, I know, invited. We'll send over some info. This first one's small. The next one will have a lot more, you know, expectation to reach in December. So we will get that over to you guys.
Great.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. If folks have additional questions, please feel free to ask. I know, John, you have to head out, but if other speakers are willing to stick around, we can have more discussion.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Let's see. So additional questions. There was a question for Grace. The question is FCDO willing to pay to find and acquire supply-demand data? There are apparently a number of folks working to find that reliable data stream, and funding would help their work.
Well, so kind of answer in two parts. Yes, we are willing to pay for it. That's the way we're getting this work done. I can't say the name of the contractor that we're using because the agreement hasn't quite been signed off yet, but we are paying for that. Unfortunately, just because of the way that we're set at the moment to work quickly, to get through procurement quickly, which can take a really long time, and we want to respond as fast as possible, we've had to do funding this way, just go through a procurement and through a contract. We don't have funding available for others who are working on getting this data. We're happy to collaborate with you, but unfortunately we can't provide funding at this moment, and apologies for that.
Understood. Thank you so much. There's one question from Nicholas Smith here, which I don't know that any of our panelists are able to fully address, about possibly using a different style of more readily available PPE for hospitals. I do want to just mention from the OSMS experience, the specific PPE that hospitals and doctors and clinicians are willing to use is usually regulated. So getting to the point where you can just jump in a hospital setting, in a healthcare setting, to a different type of PPE that serves the same purpose but hasn't been medically verified is a really big deal. So at least in the US, I know, only if your hospital is considered being in a crisis footing can you actually use alternatives to standard supply chain products, which is especially for higher class devices. So I do want to just mention that there are hospitals that are on a crisis footing per the CDC's understanding of crisis footing are able to use alternatives, whatever they need, and they're able to reuse things that are one-time use. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has opinions, you're welcome to add on, but I just wanted to at least say what some of our medical professionals have told us.
I don't have so much of an opinion as to say that I do know that in countries that don't necessarily have the regulatory guidelines themselves, they rely very heavily on what the WHO guidelines are. And in this case, it's to use N95 respirators. And so that's what they do. I imagine if the WHO guidelines changed to use any other technology that they found superior for responding to the crisis, that countries would take that advice on board and take it very seriously. And that's why we use the WHO. Well, it's not the only reason they have expertise, but it's an important factor for engaging with developing countries, that the WHO is a partner, because the WHO guidelines are so trusted and depended upon in developing countries.
And so in that case, it would be a question of kind of attempting to have discussions to move policy and change crisis suggestions to be more encompassing of potential other solutions. But I imagine that's a whole process of advocating.
I don't think it's something that would happen in the next week, but so yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that looks like the questions that we have. Andrew Lamb says Field Ready is working on that. Thank you, Andrew. So that looks like the questions that we have. And I want to thank all of our panelists for being here and making the time, and thank all of our attendees. Devin, do you want to talk a little bit more about what's available after we hang up the phone here?
Yeah, that sounds great. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for all of the speakers, all of the hosts, all of the attendees. I'm thrilled that this has been such a productive event. So following up on that, we do have some open time in Discord if anyone wants to connect over there in text or voice. That will also be available. It is on the Helpful Engineering Discord server, so that will be something that you can access through the future, not just today. We do also have a note stock, so we will share those note stocks, we will share recordings, we will share any slides that speakers are willing to have us pass on via email for all of the attendees following this. And I believe that's everything. So please feel free to connect, and thank you again for being here.